So next up, we've got Emma Richards. Emma Richards is a transfusion practitioner at Doncaster. And she's going to talk to us about the implementation of Blood360 and the phase 3 bedside. So similar talk, but not hemonetics this time. It's going to make a nice change.
As Rachel said, we're talking about the Blood360 system, which is by MSoft, so it's quite disappointing that they've not managed to turn up today. So it's like any other tracking system. It ensures right blood, right patient with vein-to-vein traceability. We haven't got the electronic sample labelling like Julie talked about, but we've took it on from collection side, and we are now looking at the administration side of it. So that's what I'll be talking about today. So the Blood360, it uses the kiosk to control access to the blood fridges, and it doesn't, like Helen was just talking about, using barcodes and things, it uses fingerprints. So it's like a biometric system. So nobody can use anybody else's. So that's one plus what we liked about that. So the administration side of it then use handheld devices, and what you do, you scan the wristband and then you scan the unit of blood as well to make sure that this matches. So our implementation plan then was split into 3 phases. So the first phase, which we didn't really get involved with at all, was the changing of wristbands. So we needed wristbands for all areas. So this was a really big project. I've only just come into it at 2019, so I wasn't really involved in the collection side of it either. But the collection side of it was another big project, which involved getting the kiosks in place, new fridges. We then got satellite fridge within our neonatal unit, which is for the use of Women's and Children's Hospital. So we had all that to implement, training for lab staff. Obviously, we've got new fridges and things for the lab staff to be aware of, a new system for them, and also new training for the clinical side as well. So fortunately, I missed that bit. So, but that is working well now. It's quite a user-friendly system. So I'm involved in the training of staff for that. We've got it on our ESR for training as well, so it lets us know when our staff have expired with the training. So that's really, really well. It works really well at the moment. You have a few issues if it goes down and things like that, but it's like any electronic system. But as a whole, we tend to report any problems that do get dealt with straight away. So now phase 3 is what we're looking at, which is the receiving and the administration, and for batch issue as well for anti-D. This is ongoing. So I was hoping that because we had to delay today's session by a couple of months, that I would have to update my presentation. Unfortunately not, and you'll see more into that as we go along. So phase 3 then is what I'm really going to focus on now. So our plan to pilot this was in our haematology oncology day unit, because obviously they're our highest unit users. We don't need the handheld device for these. They don't use EOBs, sorry. So what we're doing is we're jumping on another initiative from the trust to do EOBs on a mobile device. So that, you will see as we talk later, is another thing what's like prevented us from taking the project forward. So we decided to pilot it in Chatsfield Suite because we didn't have to wait for that side of things to be ready, so we could test the system, make sure it worked, and pick up any problems with it. So we trialled this back in May 2002 for 2 weeks. It works really, really well. We're really pleased with it. It's user friendly, the staff like it. And what we decided to do was on the job training. We didn't want to do a massive training session and then them not use it for a while. So we'd go through it with them as they come to use it. And that involved myself. And then obviously I'd need the sisters' involvement as well. We have got a clinical educator on board. It comes to some of the meetings, but not all. So what this phase 3 is involved with is ward receipt. So you scan the unit when it arrives on the ward. You scan it to start transfusion. And you scan it to end transfusion. So we had a lot of testing to do this before we even took it out onto our haematology ward. We had to look at putting rules in place, for example. So that's where I stepped into it, testing that these rules worked, such as if the unit has been taken out for too long from the blood fridge, will it stop them? We had to put these certain rules in, and things like that. And to be honest, it's quite that's my geeky side, because when something goes wrong and it's not working as it should do, and then you make that change to the rule and then it works again, you're like, oh, we can move on to the next stage. So that was really good, and really good to be involved in. And as we put there, end transfusion. So when we first tested it out on haematology, once we'd gone through the full testing process and made sure that all these rules actually worked, we took it live into the haematology day unit. And it worked as it did when I tested it, but they couldn't end transfusion. And we're thinking, well, why not? It worked in tests when we did it. So what it was a simple solution. It was because we hadn't set the nurses up to be able to let them end transfusion. So it was getting used to all these things and setting the rules in place and who can do that, which members of staff are allowed to use certain parts of it. So that's been a big learning process with that. But where we've come unstuck at the moment with that side of it, because at the moment we could get that bit live and going, but the only problem was the bloodhound system and our LIMS system was not talking to each other, so it wasn't fating correctly. So when you went into LIMS, it crashed the system when you looked at patient transfusion history. So it sort of put it in there to say they've had something, but if you looked at the history, it was all blank. So I've just spoke to our pathology IT manager this morning. This is still ongoing. It's been a few months now, but apparently the solution worked in test. When they've moved it to live, it's not, and it's how they all talk to each other. So that's what's getting looked at the moment. So we're still not live in our day unit, which we thought would, by this time we were expecting to have been live for a good few months. So the batch issue side of it, then, this is with the anti-D. So we're going to be treating anti-D as a unit. So they will be coming to collect the anti-D, going through exactly the same process as they do to collect blood as well. So we're trying to do a lot of different things at the same time at the moment. Batch issue, we should be able to complete this as well, but this involves our pathology IT manager, and unfortunately he's inundated with other things at the moment. So we don't seem to be moving forward with this either at the moment. So this would be a change of process. So the staff, so for those staff who are already trained in the collection side of things, won't be a problem at all. They'll come in and they'll do exactly the same thing, but they'll be collecting anti-D instead. But we've got to now think of those staff like an antenatal clinic. They'll need training, whereas they didn't bother before. So they'll need the collection training as well. So it's more collection training as well as the other side of the administration training. So we've got sort of two extra arms of training, what's going to be involved as well. So, but that bit is still, we still need to test it in the lab. It's all ready to go. We've changed how we book in the lab to get the different labels and things, but we've not actually gone forward to test it at the moment. As I said, we're waiting on the pathology IT manager, so it just puts you behind a little bit. So they can request blood at the patient's bedside with 360, so where it's needed. So if there's a green tick next to the blood unit, then they know it's ready for collection. So hopefully this is going to reduce the number of phone calls that blood bank get to ask if blood is ready. The Portable blood bank are informed, and the blood unit then gets collected to the ward. So other features include the option to be notified when the unit's available. So we've not really gone into this section at the moment yet, because we're not quite there with the tele-tracking side of it and the collection side of it. That's where we're coming unstuck, as I'm going to talk about in a moment. So the next few slides all are to do with problems we've encountered, just to give you an idea, and to hopefully that if you are implementing systems like this, that you'll get something out of this. So large training commitment, obviously, huge amount of training required. And once you've let it go, you sort of lose control a bit. So once you've actually done their training, it's like a big thing, isn't it? So that you've passed it on to somebody else then, and you're hoping that your training has obviously made sure that people are doing what they should be doing correctly. approval of phase 3 business case, like Nicola were talking about earlier about getting that business case. The reason that we was able to go forward with phase 3 was because we had funding for handheld devices. So our trust has gone forward with electronic hobs, as I briefly mentioned at the beginning, and these are all on mobile phones. So the reason we was allowed funding was because we don't have to buy the extra devices for this to be implemented. We will have the app on the devices what the trust has already funded. So that's why how it helped with our business case. It might be something that you look at yourself. Staff turnover has been a really big problem. Considerable amount at all levels. So we've had 3 project managers, for example, in this project. The first one was obviously on the ball, their project, rolling with it. And then the one we've got at the moment, I think seems to, you get the impression that they've just adopted it to finish it. So we're not getting that push, what we were getting before. And again, that's out of our control as a transfusion team. This is the trust project leaders. So it's not really something we can do. So that has been one of the big things as well. So political issues then, we have come across when we were ready to move on to another section of the implementation plan is payment. So the supplier would say to us that you've not paid for that section, you need to pay for that section till we go ahead with this bit. This is all what we don't really get involved in, but obviously it frustrates us because we're not getting anywhere. So we're having these meetings and we're at the same stage as trying to get the payment done so we can move on to the next section. So that is something to bear in mind. What we're trying to do now, so just have a look if it comes up. Yeah, product issues. So the devices are not particularly robust. We've had a lot of issues. So because when we were training in the haematology day unit, we'd used the devices for a while, and then we didn't do anything. So then we made some changes to the testing system, trying to make that fating unit problem work. And so went back in to have a look, tried to use the device, and it lost all its connectivity, had to be reset again because we'd not been using it for that long. So there's things like that to look at. So where we are now is that we are looking at the teletracking side of things. So this is what teletracking is with our trust. Obviously it's a separate system involved completely, so, and it's all to do with the collection. So they've had to completely do a build of the interface, use our servers, use our internal servers. But what our trust has done in the past year or so has actually changed how they allow third-party access. So now we must use an individual setup and approve all the accounts. So you can appreciate this has been a long drawn out process just to get the approval for them to get involved. And what we are using, we're using MSoft, which is a supplier, teletracking, also using our LIMS system and our Trust IT system. So you can imagine trying to get a meeting with all these people involved has been an absolute nightmare. Sometimes people turn up, sometimes they don't. If the right people don't turn up, you're not getting any further forward with your meetings. And it's really been frustrating, to be fair. More problems encountered. Pathology IT issues. So this has actually come from the pathology IT manager himself when I asked him what he thought the reasons for delays and things was. So you're trying to work with a system you've already got and make it fit, basically, and you are going to have problems. Yes, there was an updated upgrade available, what we could have used, but the trust wasn't prepared to go down that route because we might be changing to a single LIMS anyway. Excuse me. And so you're left with trying to patch things and make things work with the things you've actually got. And the pathology IT manager says he found it that he was learning more by exposure than by design. By just actually doing something, you think, So that makes that happen. That makes that happen. Really, we should have had them step by steps. If you do this, this will happen. If you do this, and he wasn't finding that at all. So that's been really, really frustrating as well. And obviously COVID, obviously put on complete hold over COVID. Just as we were getting to a point as well. So we seem to have had to go back and revisit parts of the projects, get the people back on board and everything. So obviously people trying to get back, like I say, the external, you've got your third party companies trying to get them back involved in your particular project when everything's been put on hold has been really, really hard. So that obviously has been a main issue. And we have had pressure from the top actually about cutting the project because it was taking so long. So that was last year, I think. Fortunately, we was able to say we are so close now. Please let us just carry on with it because it'd be really, really good and to implement this and get this in place. We do need it as a trust. So fortunately, it's not been scrapped. So, but to have done all that work and get that far, that would have been very disappointing. So advice on anybody else implementing the new system: don't underestimate the amount of training involved, utilise IT, make sure this is in your business plan for somebody from IT, get somebody involved there, making sure you've got somebody like your clinical educators who can be released to help you with your project, taking that out, and train the trainers, look at all that as well. Knowledge of other trust projects, which is great, which is why we've got today's session as well, looking at how other people have done it. Hopefully, I know mine sounds quite negative, but I am excited about it. It's just been a really, really frustrating project, to be fair. But knowing what other people are doing, I liked when Helen mentioned about a video, for example, getting a video to help with training and things like that. So people have got constant access to things like this. And keep the pressure on. That once we did the collection and the fridges were a lot of lab involvement. This side of it now is a lot of the IT side of it and talking and building servers and building infrastructure and things within systems. Goes a bit over my head, to be fair, when you're in some of these meetings and they're talking the IT talk, but we still, just because it's not your section and you're not as involved, we still need to be making sure that we keep that pressure on, and making sure that we're pushing that project lead to make sure that people do attend the meetings, because without attending the meetings you don't get anywhere. So that's the biggest thing to take out of this, really. Just make sure that everybody who's involved does turn up, and they are made to turn up at the meetings. And obviously expect multiple system interfacing problems. If you're trying to work with a variety of IT issues, you know yourselves that one IT system can fail and give you problems. So if you're trying to combine a lot of IT systems, expect it. But have that support, get your pathology IT manager. Our pathology IT manager is inundated with a lot of work, and so transfusion to him and this project to him is a very, very small part of his role. We haven't got a dedicated pathology IT manager involved in this, so that would have been really useful as well to have something like that. But obviously it's your staffing and the costings of all that involved, and getting your IT support. And also our LIMS system is actually Australian. So when something is wrong with that, you've got to then send a message. You're sending messages at different times of day, night, different time zones and things. So that's been waiting on things to come back and solutions to problems and things like that. That's not been easy, and it's been a long drawn out process as well. So we've not implemented, like I said, we're still not there. At the fating side of it, as I said, any day now, like the pathology IT manager said to me today, he said soon, but I have been hearing that for a long time. I'm going to be pushing it because we're really wanting it. We need it to be in our day unit, to get it, to make sure it's working properly. It did appear to be for that initial trial, and it did appear to be fantastic, but we need to get that on board so we know before we're rolling it out. And what else? So would we go through it all again? Of course we would, because it ensures the right blood, right patient, vein-to-vein traceability. It's removing that human error. So having this system in place, it's going to be improving transfusion safety, therefore improving patient safety. So we've recently had an incident as well, where we did transfuse the wrong blood to a patient. This system would have prevented that. They would have had to check the wristband and then check the unit. So this has gone in that's been classed as an SI, and so as somebody discussed earlier, I think it was Nicola, where she says, but usually cases do get put forward and get a lot more pressure on them if you have had an SI to do with it. So unfortunately, we have had this SI. Patient wasn't harmed, so that was good news. But I think that will help us to push the project forward. And that is me. So I can't go any further because we've not got there yet. So as I said, I wanted to be able to say, yes, we've got it and it's fantastic. But it's like any other system. We've encountered problems. So you just got to accept it and just keep that pressure on, really.